While my cousins were busy flaunting their millions at my grandfather's funeral, I stood there clutching a wrinkled envelope with a single plain ticket inside. They laughed at me that day like I was the family joke. 8 months later, those same people came crawling, begging me to forgive them. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories. My name is Elliot Thorne. What I am about to share is how the hardest day of my life became the turning point I never expected. But before I explain, you need to know the players in this twisted game my grandfather set in motion long before he passed. There was Kendrick, my older cousin, standing tall in his $8,000 Armani suit, rehearsing the speech he planned to give the employees once he slid into the chief executive officer's chair. His sister Sloane, hiding behind dark designer sunglasses, was probably daydreaming about which filter she would use on Instagram to show off her new yacht. Their parents, Dalton and Vivienne, looked like scavengers who had finally stumbled on a fresh carcass. My uncle's hand practically twitched, ready to snatch the documents the lawyer held. And then there was me, the high school history teacher who had driven 3 hours in an old Ford Focus with bad brakes, just to say goodbye to the only person in this family who had ever really cared about me. My grandfather Warren built an empire from nothing. He started with a single fishing boat and grew it into Thorne Maritime Corporation. Everyone in the family wanted their slice of his kingdom. Everyone but me. All I wanted was another 5 minutes to sit across from him at the chessboard. The same chessboard where he once taught me that the strongest move is usually the one nobody sees coming. That funeral was more than a farewell to Warren Thorne. It was the moment I realized that the smallest gift can hide the greatest secret, and that sometimes the people laughing at you are standing on ground that is ready to give way. My alarm still rang at 6 o'clock every morning, same as it had for 7 years since I started teaching at Riverside High School in Detroit. My one-bedroom apartment looked the same, right down to the water stain on the ceiling I had stared at for 4 years, shaped a little like Michigan if you squinted. The neighbor's dog barked on cue, and Mrs. Novak, the woman next door, started her morning stretches loud enough for me to hear through the thin walls. That was my life. Simple, predictable, a far cry from the world my last name was supposed to represent. Being a Thorne opened doors at yacht clubs and private academies. It meant summer homes, investments, and high-powered friends. For me, it meant trying to decide whether to pay rent or fix the transmission on my car. I had walked away from all of that to spend my days teaching teenagers about the Revolutionary War and the Great Depression. My father, Graham, was the only one who truly understood why I made that choice. He died when I was 16, dropped from a heart attack at his desk while working through contracts for his brother Dalton's branch of the company. Dad had been the dependable one, the man who kept things together while Dalton took the credit. His last words to me were, "Elliot, do not let them turn you into something you are not. Your grandfather did that to me, and look where I ended up." 3 hours later, he was gone. After that, my mother Iris kept us afloat. She was a nurse at St. Clement's Hospital, working 12-hour shifts to make up for the fact that Dad had signed away most of his shares to bail Dalton out of a bad investment. That was Dad, always putting others ahead of himself, always carrying the weight for the family. Mom never spoke harshly about it, but the look she gave Dalton at Dad's funeral said everything. Grandfather Warren remained an enigma wrapped in expensive suits. He built Thorne Shipping with his Navy discharge pay after World War II. By the time I was born, he owned cargo ships, warehouses spread across a dozen cities, and enough money to live however he pleased. But here's the thing about him. He did not believe in handing things out. He believed in making people earn them. My birthday cards always came with a $50 bill and a note that said, "Turn this into more." Christmas gifts were never toys or luxuries, only practical things, business books, or enrollment vouchers for accounting courses. The only time he ever seemed genuinely interested in me was when we sat down at the chessboard on Sundays. That started after I won a small school tournament at age 10. One Sunday morning, he appeared at our apartment with a chess set it down, and said, "Show me what you can do." I lost in 12 moves, but he came back the next Sunday and the one after that until those matches became our ritual. You play like your father, he told me once. Too concerned with saving your pieces, not enough focus on winning the game. I said back, maybe I do not want to lose everything just to win. For the first time, he smiled. A real smile. Maybe that is why you are the only one who still interests me, Elliot. Kendrick and Sloan never understood those games. Kendrick shadowed grandfather at the office, memorizing terms like profit margins and tax shelters. He got his Master of Business Administration from Kellogg School of Management, just like grandfather, and reminded us of it at every dinner. Every conversation turned into one of Kendrick's lectures about acquisitions and market efficiency. He was fluent in buzzwords, as if life were one long PowerPoint presentation. Sloan chose a different path. She crafted herself into an image, documenting her life as the shipping heiress for hundreds of thousands of followers online. Her days were spent posing on yachts, in designer clothes at exotic European harbors. She called it building her platform, but everyone knew she was burning through grandfather's money while she waited for more to come her way. Her greatest accomplishments were getting a blue check mark on Instagram and dating a Swiss banker with his own vineyard. Dalton and Vivienne, their parents, looked every bit the power couple, at least on the surface. In truth, they were hollow, feeding off the wealth my grandfather had created, convinced they were the rightful heirs to everything he had built. Dalton had managed to climb into the role of chief financial officer at Thorne Shipping, though everyone knew his assistant carried most of the real weight. Vivienne, on the other hand, filled her days with charity galas. She was not there to champion any cause. She was there because she liked seeing her photo printed in the society pages. Their mansion was so oversized, they needed an intercom system just to call each other from room to room. And then there was me. I spent my days teaching 37 restless teenagers about the Constitution, grading essays at a kitchen table I had picked up at a garage sale. As small as my life might have looked next to theirs, I felt a kind of satisfaction none of them could even begin to understand. That was the world I knew before the funeral, before the envelope, before everything flipped upside down. Back then, I thought I understood who I was and where I stood. Turns out, I had been paying attention to the wrong pieces on the chessboard all along. That October afternoon, the Laurelwood Country Club felt like a trap. Grandfather Warren had insisted his will be read in the very oak-paneled room where he had sealed his biggest business deals over brandy and cigars. The long mahogany table gleamed like a dark mirror, reflecting our faces back at us. I watched Kendrick fiddle with his Rolex for the third time in 5 minutes. We had just come from the cemetery, where the autumn rain had turned the burial into a mud bath. Vivienne had spent the entire car ride complaining about the state of her shoes. "Before we begin," said Mr. Quinlan, the family lawyer, he pushed his wire-rimmed glasses up the bridge of his nose and cleared his throat. "I want you all to understand, Warren was very clear about these instructions. He reviewed this will just a week before he passed." Dalton leaned forward, his knuckles white with eagerness. "We understand, Quinlan. Warren and I discussed the succession plan many times." That was a flat-out lie. Everyone in that room knew grandfather never talked business outside the office. He certainly never promised Dalton anything. But Dalton had been telling anyone who would listen that he was the next chief executive officer, with Kendrick at his side, and that the Thorne legacy would be secure under their watch. "Let us proceed, then," Quinlan said, opening a leather folder. "To my eldest son, Dalton Thorne, and his wife Vivienne, I leave the estate in Montauk and the investment portfolio contained in account ending in 632. Vivienne clutched Dalton's arm so tightly her diamond bracelet caught the light. "Montauk House! Oh, Dalton, he remembered how much we loved it there." Quinlan kept reading. "To my grandson, Kendrick Thorne, I leave Thorne Maritime Corporation and all of its operational assets with the requirement that current employment levels be maintained for at least 1 year." Kendrick shot out of his chair so fast, it screeched across the floor. "I knew it. Grandfather, I will not let you down." His phone was already in his hand, and I had no doubt he was updating his LinkedIn profile to reflect his new title. "To my granddaughter, Sloan Thorne, I leave the Manhattan penthouse on Sutton Place and the yacht Meridian, currently moored in Kennebunkport." Sloan shrieked like she had just won the lottery. "The penthouse! Oh my God, do you even know what that is worth? And the yacht? My followers are going to lose their minds. Then Quinlan turned toward me. There was something in his eyes, almost pity. And to my grandson, Elliot Thorne, I leave this. He pulled out a small white envelope, corners bent and edges worn, my name written in grandfather's shaky script. The silence in the room lasted about 2 seconds before Kendrick broke it with laughter. Are you serious? An envelope? That is it? My heart was pounding, but my hands stayed steady as I took it. The envelope felt weightless, fragile. Inside was a single plane ticket. Bordeaux, one way. Departure in 48 hours. Let me see that. Kendrick snatched it from my hand before I could stop him. A coach ticket? Oh, this is priceless. The teacher gets a vacation. Sloane had her phone up, already recording. This is comedy gold. Elliot, your face is perfect. Do not worry. Maybe he threw in some frequent flyer miles, too. Dalton rose from his chair, straightening his tie like a man who believed he had just inherited the world. Warren always said you did not have the instincts for business, Elliot. At least he gave you something nice. Bordeaux is beautiful this time of year. Vivian added, her tone dripping with false sympathy. It is probably his way of saying goodbye, a little trip to help you grieve. Very thoughtful. In the corner, my mother finally spoke for the first time that day. Is that everything, Mr. Quinlan? That concludes the distribution of assets, Quinlan replied, closing the folder. There is, however, a personal letter for Elliot to be opened only upon his arrival in Bordeaux. A letter? Kendrick nearly doubled over with laughter. What is it going to say? Sorry you were broke? Enjoy the pizza? Kendrick, enough, Dalton cut in, though the smirk on his face said he was enjoying every second of it. Elliot chose to be a teacher. Warren respected that enough to give him this parting gift. We should all be grateful for what we have received. I looked down at the ticket again. October 16th, 4 o'clock in the afternoon arrival. Air France Flight 1847. Why Bordeaux? Why that specific day and time? Grandfather had talked about Shanghai, London, Hamburg, but never once about France. I slid the ticket back into the envelope and stood up. I guess I better pack. You're actually going? Sloane looked at me like I had lost my mind. You're really going to burn your sick days just to fly to Bordeaux for no reason? My grandfather gave me a ticket, I said, looking each of them in the eye. The least I can do is use it. Dalton shook his head slowly, lips curling in that smug way of his. Sentimental fool, just like your father. Graham never understood that emotion has no place in business. Right then, I knew I was stepping onto that plane. Because Dalton was dead wrong about my dad, dead wrong about me, and maybe, just maybe, dead wrong about what my grandfather had truly left behind. That thin ticket barely weighed a thing, yet it pressed heavier in my pocket than all the millions my cousins had just inherited. As I walked out of the country club, their laughter trailing me into the parking lot, I thought of grandfather's last words during our final chess game. The best moves, Elliot, are the ones your opponent never even sees coming. The rain had finally stopped. A sliver of sun broke through the clouds. For the first time that day, I felt something shift. That night, I sat at my old kitchen table, staring at the ticket while my laptop screen glowed with the cold truth. My bank account balance, $2,153.47. Rent was due in 5 days. My car's brakes were shot. I had a stack of 43 Civil War essays waiting to be graded. Every logical thought told me this trip was reckless, maybe even stupid. But then I remembered grandfather's face during our last chess game, just 2 weeks before he passed. He had seemed different that day, softer somehow, like he had finally stopped playing a part he had worn for decades. He moved his knight in a way I had never seen before and asked, Elliot, what do you know about trust? It's earned, not given, I had answered, the lesson he had drilled into all of us. No, boy, he said, shaking his head. Real trust is knowing when to follow even if you do not understand why. Your father knew that. He trusted me with something once, something precious, and I failed him. But you, Elliot, you're different. You never wanted anything from me. I never have, I told him. I know. And that's why when the time comes, you'll trust me, even when everyone else thinks you're a fool. Now, with that ticket in my hand, those words felt less like memory and more like instruction. I picked up the phone and called my mother. I'm going, I told her the second she answered. I knew you would. Mom said without hesitation. Your grandfather called me last month. He did not say much, just that I should support whatever choice you made after the funeral. Mom, this is crazy. I can't afford to take time off. I have responsibilities. Elliot, she said gently, your father once told me Warren was not always the man we knew. He said there was a before and an after in his father's life. We only knew the after. Maybe this is about the before. The next morning, I went to Riverside High and arranged for a substitute. Dr. Calloway, the principal, frowned at the short notice, but I had not taken a sick day in 7 years, so she gave me 3 days. 3 days to fly to Bordeaux and figure out what game my grandfather had started. Mr. Thorne, you okay? Bryn, one of my brightest students, asked after class. You seem different today. Just thinking about history, Bryn, I said. How sometimes the most important moments don't look important when they're happening. I packed light, 1 carry-on bag, 2 changes of clothes, and my father's old leather journal I had carried since his funeral. The Uber ride to Detroit Metropolitan cost me $45 I could not really spare, but I was already too far in to turn back. At the gate, waiting to board, I pulled out the envelope again. That was when I noticed something I had missed before. Faint pencil marks in the corner, 1947. Grandfather would have been 22 then, the year after he left the Navy. Boarding Group 3, the flight attendant called. I fell in line behind a family juggling kids and carry-ons, the dad glued to his phone, the mom trying to keep the peace. Normal people with normal problems. None of them carrying a mystery across the Atlantic. My seat was 27C, middle of the back row. Kendrick had been right, it was Coach. The man to my left was already snoring. The woman to my right had claimed both armrests and was blasting a movie on her tablet without headphones. As the plane lifted off and Detroit shrank beneath us, I thought about my cousins. Kendrick was probably sitting in grandfather's chair, feeling like a king. Sloan was no doubt posing on the yacht, posting sunset pictures. Dalton and Vivienne were likely already meeting with financial advisors. And me? I was wedged in Coach, broke, flying towards something I could not explain, and somehow it felt right. For the first time since grandfather died, I felt like I was where I was supposed to be. The flight attendant stopped by. Sir, would you like something to drink? Just water, thanks. As I cracked the bottle open, I remembered another chess game. The day grandfather sacrificed his queen. I had been stunned, convinced he had lost. Power isn't about what you hold on to, Elliot, he had told me. It's about what you are willing to lose to gain something greater. Most people can't see past the loss. That's why they never truly win. The plane banked east into the night, carrying me toward Bordeaux and whatever secret my grandfather had left behind. My cousins thought they had walked away with everything that mattered. They had no idea what was really in play. As the plane settled into its 9-hour flight, a strange feeling crept over me. It was as if grandfather's real game had only just begun, and I was the lone piece he had set on the board. The captain's voice came over the speaker, announcing our cruising altitude. I pressed my father's old journal against my chest, closed my eyes, and tried to trust a dead man's plan, even though I had no idea what the board even looked like. When the wheels hit the tarmac at Bordeaux's Bordeaux-Marignac Airport, 4:18 p.m. on the dot, I was stiff, exhausted, and running on almost no sleep. The French announcements mixed with English as we taxied to the gate, and reality finally caught up with me. I was in Bordeaux, no hotel, no plan, no idea what my next move was supposed to be. Immigration passed in a haze of stamps and questions. Purpose of visit? The officer asked in careful English. I honestly don't know, I said, too tired to invent anything. He gave me a curious look, but stamped my passport anyway. Welcome to France. I trailed the crowd toward baggage claim, even though all I had was my carry-on. The arrivals hall was a riot of noise, families reuniting, drivers waving signs, tourists looking lost. I was about to walk toward the exit when I spotted it, a crisp printed sign with my name on it. Elliot Thorne. A man in a black suit held it at chest level. My heart skipped. I walked over slowly. I'm Elliot Thorne. The man's face relaxed. Mr. Thorne, finally, please come quickly. His English was accented but smooth. Who sent you? I asked. Your grandfather arranged everything months ago. My name is Alain. Please, we have a long drive. Before I could argue, He had taken my bag and led me outside to a sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than 2 years of my salary. The October air was soft and warm, nothing like Detroit's biting autumn. Alon opened the back door and I sank into leather seats as plush as clouds. "Where are we going?" I asked as he pulled away from the curb. "Domaine de Clairvaux, 40 minutes north into the Bordeaux wine country." "I don't understand. My grandfather never mentioned any estate in France." Alon's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. Mr. Thorne owned the estate for 45 years. He visited every September, 1 week, always alone. 45 years. That meant since 1980, long before I was even born. The math didn't add up. Nothing did. We left Bordeaux's sprawl behind and climbed into hills lined with vineyards stretching to the horizon. The scenery was almost painfully beautiful, like one of those movies about a lost American finding himself in France. Alon drove with typical French confidence, taking curves fast enough to make me grab the door handle. "How did you know my grandfather?" I asked. "My father was his driver first. When Papa died, I took over. 20 years now I drive Mr. Thorne when he come." 20 years of secret September trips no one in my family had ever heard about. What else had grandfather been hiding? The road narrowed through a French hamlet of Saint-Macaire where old men sat outside a cafe, watching us pass. Then Alon turned onto a private lane lined with poplar trees. Electronic gates swung open automatically, revealing a domain that stole my breath. 3 stories of golden stone, terraces spilling over endless vineyards, gardens that looked painted by some Renaissance master. Alon parked in front of massive wooden doors that had probably been there for centuries. Before I could get my bearings, the doors opened. An older woman stepped out. She was elegant in a way that had nothing to do with money. Silver hair pulled into a simple bun, eyes the same cool gray as grandfather's. She walked toward me, tears sliding down her cheeks, and I already knew before Alon spoke the words that would change everything. "Elliot," he said softly, "meet your grandmother, Estelle Thorne." The world tilted under me. I grabbed the car door for balance. "That's impossible," I blurted. "My grandmother died before I was born." Estelle reached me, her hands closing over mine with surprising strength. "Your American grandmother did die, mon cher, but I am very much alive." Her English was flawless, formal, touched with music. She studied my face as if memorizing every line. "You have his eyes," she whispered, "but your father's gentle spirit. Come inside, Elliot. There is so much to tell you." Inside the domain, there was no gaudy wealth, just quiet, understated elegance. She led me to a sitting room whose walls were lined with photographs. My grandfather appeared in them again and again, young, smiling, standing in front of a small chapel, a wedding picture. He and Estelle, both barely in their 20s, radiant. "We married in 1947, Estelle said, watching me try to take it in. "Warren came to France with the Navy. After the war, he stayed to help rebuild. We met at a dance in Bordeaux. He was so handsome, so full of dreams. We started with nothing, just a few acres of vines his friends sold us for almost nothing." She poured 2 glasses of deep red wine from a crystal decanter. "This is from our domain, perpetual, we call it. Inheritance." The wine was extraordinary, rich, layered, alive. "I don't understand," I said. "Grandfather had a whole life here." "More than a life, mon cher." Estelle's eyes didn't leave mine. "He had a family. Me. Our son, Bastien. The grandchildren he never met because he chose America instead." "He left you?" I asked, my voice unsteady. "The Korean War began," Estelle said softly. "Warren felt duty-bound to return. He told me 6 months. That was the plan." There was no anger in her tone, only a kind of sadness worn smooth by time. "But while on leave, he met your American grandmother. She became pregnant with Dalton." My stomach twisted. "An honorable man would have divorced me," she went on, "but Warren could not bring himself to give up either life. So he carried both, separate, hidden." My hands were shaking. "He lived a lie." "No, Elliot," her eyes were steady on mine. "He lived 2 truths. He loved us both in different ways." She walked over to an antique desk, pulled open a drawer, and brought out a thick folder. "The vineyard grew," she said. "It became successful. He sent money. He visited every year, but he never could choose." She set the folder down in front of me. "Until now." On the cover, Thorne Estate Holdings. $54 million in assets. "It is all yours, Elliot," Estelle said. He was clear. "Not Dalton, not Kendrick. You." The folder was packed with deeds, contracts, bank statements, proof that grandfather had built a second empire across the ocean. My head spun, but what cut deepest wasn't the papers. It was the video Estelle queued up on an old laptop. Grandfather's face filled the screen. For the first time, he looked at peace. "Elliot," he said, voice rough but steady, "if you're watching this, then you trusted me enough to get on that flight. Good. You were always the only one who understood that life is about more than money. Your cousins, they got what they wanted, the illusion of wealth. But illusions crumble. Thorn Shipping has been bleeding money for 4 years. I've buried it in the books, but Kendrick's about to inherit a sinking ship. The penthouse? 3 mortgages. The yacht? Leased. Montauk Estate? The bank owns most of it. I gave them exactly what they valued, empty prizes that glitter only on the surface." He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes sharp. "But you, Elliot, you came every Sunday just to play chess. You never asked for anything. You chose teaching over money because you wanted meaning. So I'm giving you what you never asked for: truth, family, and yes, real wealth." The vineyard produces 3 million bottles a year. The domain has been in Estelle's family for 3 centuries. Your uncle Bastien has been running things, waiting for you. Your cousins Remy and Odette are good people, nothing like Kendrick and Sloane. This is your real inheritance, a family that works, land that creates, a legacy built on truth. He paused, the old fire in his eyes. "And Elliot, your next move is yours. But listen to my advice. Within a month, Kendrick will call, desperate. Be kinder to him than he was to you. That is what makes you better. Checkmate, my boy." The screen went black. Estelle placed her hand gently on my shoulder. "He spoke of you every visit," she said. "Stories about his grandson, the teacher who chose meaning over money. I spent 3 weeks in France learning everything." Uncle Bastien looked so much like my father it ached to see him. He ran the vineyard with quiet discipline, never bitter about being the hidden son. Remy and Odette welcomed me like I was a long-lost brother. They taught me the vines, the soil, the work that went into every bottle. "He was different here," Odette told me one night as we walked the rows. "Lighter, laughing, with his hands in the dirt, not the hard man you knew." 23 days later, the call came. I was back in Detroit finishing up grading when my phone rang close to midnight. "Elliot, it's Kendrick. We need to talk." His voice was stripped of arrogance. "The company's bankrupt. The accountants uncovered everything. Dad lost the house. Sloane's penthouse was foreclosed yesterday. It's all gone." "I'm sorry, Kendrick," I said quietly. "No, you're not, and you shouldn't be. We were awful to you." His voice cracked. "Grandfather left you something real, didn't he?" "Yes." "Good. You deserve it. You were the only one who actually loved him, not his money." The next day I made him an offer, managing U.S. distribution for Domaine Perpetuelle. A salary, not ownership. He agreed without hesitation. Sloane was slower to let go of her pride, but eventually she came around. Turns out she's actually talented at marketing when she's pushing something real instead of herself. She's engaged now to Alain's son, living in Bordeaux, learning the business from the ground up. Dalton and Vivienne downsized to a small apartment in Westchester County, NY. Dalton found bookkeeping work. Vivienne took a job at Bloomingdale's. They don't speak to me, but Kendrick says they're closer now, forced to rely on each other instead of money. As for Mom, she moved into the guest house on the Sonoma County, California property I bought with my first vineyard payment. Mom finally retired from nursing. These days she spends her hours painting, something she had always dreamed of doing but never had the chance to while working double shifts. And me? I still teach history, but only part-time now. Every summer I fly back to France, walking the vines, learning the wine business, and building relationships with a family I never knew I had. My students think it's the funniest thing that their teacher with chalk on his hands also owns a vineyard across the ocean. I use it to teach them more than dates and battles. Lessons about trade, about land, about how families rise and fall. Just last week I sat at the domain with Uncle Bastien, a chessboard between us, when he leaned back and said, "Your grandfather always believed the winner isn't the one who captures the most pieces, but the one who knows which pieces truly matter." I stared at the board, then out the window at the vineyards, then up at a photograph of grandfather taken in 1947, young, proud, full of hope. "He won," I said quietly. "It just took 60 years for the match to end." Bastien smiled and shook his head. No, Elliot, you won. You just never realized you were playing. That crumpled envelope they all mocked, it wasn't just a plane ticket. It was a doorway into my real story, where I came from, who I belong to, and what truly matters. Grandfather gave my cousins the shiny illusions they thought they wanted. He gave me what I never knew I was missing. In my Detroit apartment, there's one bottle left that he produced himself. The label reads Perpetual 2024. Underneath, in his handwriting, for Elliot, who understood that the best inheritance isn't what you're given, but what you're trusted to continue. Every Sunday, I still set up a chessboard. Sometimes with Bastien in France, sometimes with my students in Detroit, sometimes alone, remembering the old man who orchestrated the longest, strangest game of my life. He taught me that real wealth isn't counted in dollars, but in honesty, family, and the faith to step forward even when you cannot see the end. All those years, everyone else was staring at the wrong board. The real match was being played somewhere else, on different soil, in another language, in another life. And grandfather made sure I was the only one invited to sit down and play it. So if you're listening to this story, take it as a reminder. Sometimes the smallest gifts carry the biggest surprises. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. And as always, thank you for watching.